The story that I'm about to share with you took place in 1986, one of the most unusual events in my life. And I am going to read the account to you from my book, Secret Society of the Shamans, Mystery Religions of the North American Indians Revealed. So I devoted a whole chapter in the book to that. And I want to share that with you and maybe some thoughts as we go along. So this particular stone has generated a great deal of interest over the years. Some of it good, some of it not so good, but it has been an ongoing, in some ways, a most interesting chapter in my life. So let me share this with you, and in the comments, let me know what you think. Okay, I'd be interested in hearing from you all. August of 1986 was particularly hot across the northeastern United States. On the day in question, my dog Samson, in an effort to keep cool, had dug a hole by his house. Kathy, my then wife, and I always had our eyes open for Indian relics, or relics of ancient man, and while taking Samson a pan of cold water, Kathy discovered in the dirt that he had kicked up 3 prehistoric Indian pot shards, fairly good size. And she was quite excited, of course, and so was I, about this for several different reasons. And first off, after hunting for and finding relics of ancient man all across northeast Michigan, we had never considered actually looking in our own backyard. And second, the find was made directly next to a small building in which Kathy and I had established a museum to display our treasured finds, and they were many. The odds of finding such material next to this building by the dog who had been put there to protect our finds must have been astronomical. Kathy and I got our equipment together and we began digging with eager anticipation at what might be below the surface of the ground that we had been daily walking over without a clue, as it so often happens, right? In fact, I was so excited that I called into work sick so that I could carry out the excavations that afternoon. And by the time we had completed our work on that particular section, we had excavated about a 5 foot area, and we had unearthed some 1,500 pottery shards, that is, pieces of broken pottery, which represented 2 pottery vessels dating back to the late woodland period. Now, these pots were arranged in the ground and it looked like they had just been left standing there abandoned years before and fell in upon themselves from climactic weathering rather than being shattered by, accident or whatever. So I packed those pieces away with the intent of trying to assemble them during the wintertime. There was quite a lot of other material collected. The ground yielded to us a Hopewell-style arrowhead, an unfinished ground greenstone, a portion of a human arm bone, a human head and profile fetish, hundreds of pieces of flint, and the subject of this video, a stone which resembled a celt, which is to say an ungrooved stone axe. Now, the stone did not really have the appearance of having been worked by the hand of ancient man, and I felt it had its peculiar shape quite by design of nature. Nonetheless, by its positioning among, among the other relics, there can be no doubt that it serves some purpose for the prehistoric people who had lived in what was at that time my backyard. And for me, the stone held a certain fascination which I could not explain. I took the stone and set it down on a nearby bench to examine more closely when our work was finished. Oddly, and I'm ashamed to admit, I forgot all about the stone for quite a while. Actually, almost 3 months to be exact, it laid there. Now, early in November, as the weather was becoming cold and inclement, I dug out, with no pun intended, the pottery shards and worked day and night trying to fit together as many of them as I could. And of the 1,500 pieces, I was able to assemble 17 of the larger ones, and these formed a section of pot about 12 by 7 inches in size. I was very pleased to have been able to assemble anything from this 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle that had no picture to go by. And I decided to take my work over to my friend Jerry Wagner, an avocational archaeologist like myself and an investigator, and to get his opinion, what he thought on these things. And as I was packing the pottery, I suddenly remembered the Salt Lake stone that I had left in the backyard in the summer. And in reflection, it seems odd that I should remember the stone at that particular moment out of the clear blue. I retrieved the stone from the bench in the backyard where it had lain since I took it from the ground, and I examined it carefully, then packed it with the pottery, as I wanted to get Jerry's input on this piece also. Well, when I arrived at Jerry's home on the evening of November 25th, he was anxious to see the pottery, and Jerry informed me that he had never seen such a large reconstruction of pottery shards from our area, which is Oscoda, Osco County, Othen Creek, and that area. And so he took the reconstruction from the bag that I had packed it in, and then he took the Salt Lake stone and propped the pottery up with it. Now, as Jerry's wife Marilyn watched on, he set up the pottery on the floor of his living room, as I said, propping it up with the Salt Lake stone, and Jerry began making all sorts of measurements. And for the next 45 minutes, we had a very in-depth discussion about the pot and the people who had built the pot, perhaps as much as 2,000 years prior. In point of fact, I was so engrossed by the conversation that it seemed almost as though we were surrounded by those ancient people. After we exhausted our conversation, Jerry picked up the pottery and gently handed it to me, and I placed it back in the bag as he lifted the salt. And he said to me, "Dennis, what are the markings on here?" Now, I thought at first he was joking, as there had not been any trace of anything on the stone when I examined it before packing it to take to his house. Now, however, there was a string of letter-like symbols across the face of the stone, and what was really uncanny is that they felt slightly raised from the stone, and all three of us were shocked, to say the least. We have never been able to come up with a plausible explanation for the symbols, and we wondered if somehow contact between the stone and the pottery had been a catalyst that made them appear, had somehow energized the stone. But perhaps our in-depth discussion had somehow contributed to it also. Upon returning home with this stone, my first thought was, let me back up a minute, because I didn't put this in the book. I never felt any fear from that stone, except driving home that night from Jerry's house out at Fort Wagner on F41 to where I was living at my parents' home at 6087 Cedar Lake Road. And as I was coming down at 41 in the dark, the stone was sitting on the seat next to me, and I started getting really weird vibes, and I pulled off the road. Then the lake was on my left, and I picked up the stone and I was ready to heave it. And then I thought better of it, and I kind of chuckled at myself for displaying any fear of it, and I returned home having the stone still with me. So upon returning home with the stone, my first thought was to try to photograph the symbols that were on it. The camera lens kept fogging up and the pictures came back overexposed, and this in itself was a mystery to me, as I was a pretty good photographer. And all was not lost, though, as the symbols could still be seen, though it was faintly. The symbols began to fade after I did the photographs, and by the following morning they were completely gone. There was, however, much more to come. And by the way, that night, my wife Kathy had seen them, my mom Lorraine, and my father Frank had seen them also on the stone. Now, as I said, the photographs came back overexposed. I took them to a photo studio and had them computer enhanced, which was not a great technology at that time. On the photographs were symbols, however, that we had missed before due to their small size in comparison to the main letter-like symbols. There were stick figures. One of the figures resembled a man holding a bow. Still another looked like a man running down a path. And these smaller figures were very similar in appearance to rock art found throughout the Northeast and to a lesser extent on the Midewiwin scrolls of the Grand Medicine Society, which was practiced throughout Michigan. There was no reason to expect that there would be anything else unusual happening with the stone, but much more did. The image stone, the stone's most active day was on November 28th, 1986. Jerry and I had been invited to a special after Thanksgiving Day dinner at the home of a friend and publisher in Cummins, Michigan. Neither of our wives were able to attend, being at least 45 minutes drive away. We took the stone with us, and we examined it periodically, and we discussed it a lot because it was a unique topic of conversation between Jerry and I for a very long time. And the stone, as I said, became a favorite topic. At the dinner table that night, there were 8 people. And I guided the conversation so that we could discuss the stone. And Jerry described to the eagerly listening audience what had happened on the evening of the 25th. And after hearing about the stone, all were in agreement that they wanted to see it. So I excused myself from the table and went to the car to retrieve the stone. When I reached the car, I could tell right away that the image stone was beginning to do something yet again. A dark circle was forming on the face of the stone. The dark area looked sticky and did not feel that way though to the touch. It resembled a substance that was wet and appeared that it was actually being secreted from the stone. Unlike in the first instance, this time the image was not raised from the stone. And when I took it in and showed it to everybody, they were all amazed and quite excited that it was doing anything. A man who had not seen before nor since held the stone, and over the next hour, a great deal happened. Many symbols appeared on the face of the stone in rapid succession. Indeed, the images were appearing so fast that we were unable to copy them all down, though I did copy quite a few of them down. A symbol looking like an open-topped 4 appeared along with the numbers 2 and 7, and the open 4 changed to an old-fashioned pointed 4. The action changes reminded me of how the numbers changed on the face of a digital watch. The original dark circle changed from just a circle to a circle with lines extending out of it. This gave the stone an eerie resemblance to a face in profile, the circle being the eye with lashes. I wondered at the time if this might not represent seeing something from the past. And 2 other small circles appeared, one with a sort of tail, and these were on either side of the large circle. At some point during the ongoing events, Mike, the man who was holding the stone, handed it over to the lady sitting next to him and hurriedly left. He was rather unnerved by what was occurring and the fact that he was holding that stone in his hand while it was actually occurring. The circle was still there when Jerry and I left for home about 7:00 p.m., and on the way home we pulled off the road and turned on the car light. We examined the stone to see if any further changes had taken place. The eye-like circle was still there. In the excitement, I had completely forgotten that my camera was in the car. Here on the side of M72, I snapped several pictures, and then we returned to our respective homes. There was one more occurrence that evening, and this time it was observed by my wife, Kathy, and again by my mother, Lorraine, and the circle was still present with the alleged eyebrows. Over this formed a symbol which looked like a stylized number 8. This also faded fast, and a photo produced no image. The stone seemed to have spent most of its energy by this point and was kind of running out of steam. Its activity after that became sporadic, and nothing more appeared until the 30th of November. Symbols that resembled the numbers 7, 1, and 5 appeared, and a short time later, a diamond shape with a sort of tail. And on December 5th, towards one end of the image stone, there appeared light veins of a gold color and one of silver color. These lasted for several days. Other vague shadowy figures appeared on the stone, though through the 1st of January 1987. And a few of these later symbols were well enough defined to make out, and they were fast in appearing and just as quick in fading. Now, the summer of 1987, my then brother-in-law Marlon Marks Jr. and I doused the area where the relics had been found. And we used 2 coat hangers bent in L shapes. And until this day, I was a confirmed skeptic when it came to dowsing. As we walked across my backyard, the rods would cross at the exact perimeter of where our digging had begun and remain crossed while walking across the area that we had dug, and then uncross at the other side. A dozen or so tries produced the same results, even with me doing the dowsing. There was nothing left there in the way of relics, so the reaction of the rods seemed very unusual to me. There was a residual energy, evidently, in the ground. There is, of course, the possibility that there could be deep burials there. This was not uncommon on village sites for the deceased loved ones to be buried underneath the village. But if there were no other relics there, then it had to be a residual core left in the ground where the image stone had lain for centuries, which was detected by the rods. And because we had the property up for sale, and we were in the process of moving to Greenbush, Michigan, no further excavations were able to be carried out there. I've always felt further excavations might have held the key to the symbols, as when using the dowsing rods, Marlon and I found several other areas that produced similar effects with the rods crossing each other. So the area we were able to excavate was really quite small compared to the rest of the yard. The yard itself was quite small, but the area that would be the village site that the backyard was part of was quite large. It's quite large indeed. So in looking at the relics that were found with the image stone, there are several unique things. First of all, why was there only one human arm bone? If it had been a burial site, there should have been more than just an arm bone, it would seem. I've personally looked at many relics found in the northeast woodlands, and in fact I examined the remains of over 500 prehistoric vessels. The pottery here was quite distinct. The decorating was executed in a much more precise fashion. A crosshatch design was lightly etched into the rim shards, and this was totally unseen before in that particular area. And also highly suspect is a slightly modified stone that is without question a human head fetish in profile. This stone is lightweight and brown. It has smaller stones set in naturally where the mouth, nose, and ear would be. Now, the ear stone is notched. There was no stone in place by nature where the eye should have been, but you can still see, or could at the time of this writing, you could still see the residue of an eye symbol that had been drawn on the face of the stone and was found about 15 feet from the image stone, lying on a pile of flint flakes that resembled a primitive altar. I can't say that it was a primitive altar for sure, but that's what it looked like to me. And the back of the fetish was hollowed out for some unknown purpose. Now, I could find no belief or support from the professional archaeological community in Michigan. In fact, all I found, of course, was ridicule, which was expected. It did not seem to matter that the events had been witnessed by many people who could bear out witness of the truth. My quest for understanding led me to write to the Early Sites Research Society in Raleigh, Massachusetts, and to archaeological director James P. Whittle, who read my letter, and at long last I had found someone to take me seriously, and his reply was heartening. Mr. Whittle said in his letter that certainly the lettering is familiar, and the symbols represent sun, moon, and it is possible that this was someone's talisman. But with the unusual nature of the appearance of the markings, I would suggest it is from a shaman's kit. Strange artifacts of this nature do show up all over the world, though most are inclined to think the reality is yet to be understood. It certainly was recovered in the right context. He continued, there were many times when I would walk into my little museum and all the relics we found would be dry. Yet the image stone would be dripping wet. It seemed to attract people to it in a curious way. just as it did with me in the beginning. By far, there were many more beautiful pieces in my collection of Indian artifacts, yet invariably people would come in and pick up this particular stone, only then to be amazed by the story behind it. And some people claim that when they pick up the stone, their fingers have a tingling sensation. I experienced that myself on most occasions when handling it, like there was indeed some sort of energy within it. Okay. I've tried to come up with some logical explanation for the appearance of the symbols, yet I can find none. As was suggested by Mr. Whittle, I believe that all indications point to the image stone as having been perhaps a shaman's amulet or a personal amulet belonging to whoever in the community. It could be that someone endowed with strong powers could have charged this stone with a message to be delivered up to its finder. A sort of early electronic mail. Okay. If this is the case, then how terribly sad that it should fall into my hands rather than a person who might have understood the communication. And I felt that way for a long time, but it fell into my hands for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but it came to me. I found it over the centuries it had lain there, or for centuries to come. It could have still lain there and waited for a person who may have been able to interpret all the symbols that came onto it, but it didn't. It came to me, it appeared to me, it attracted me, and it showed its symbols to me. And I still hope at some point to be able to ascertain just what those symbols may have meant. To the North American Indians, stones were extremely powerful, and they figured prominently in their religious beliefs and ceremonies. And this great significance of stones is easy to understand when you consider that they hunted their food with stone-tipped arrows and spear shafts, chopped their wood for fires with stone axes, smoked their tobacco from stone pipes, sometimes pottery, but mostly stone, used stones to process their foods and herbs, and so on and so on. It was a Stone Age society, and they depended on stones for so much. The summer following my recovery of the image stone from my backyard, I happened across a book by a Sioux medicine man named John Fire Lame Deer, and in his book, Lame Deer, Secret Visions, which was published by Simon & Schuster in 1972, he spoke of stones which bear messages. And I want to conclude, I believe, with this. Lame Deer said, a more modern word for rock is Inyan. Inyan Wakan, in our Indian name for Moses. Indian medicine men too find round stones on the hilltops, which they bring down with them to use to cure their people. And these stones bear a hidden message, which they sometimes reveal to us in visible writing for those who read with their hearts. The old medicine men used to talk to stones and were able to communicate with them. There were those shamans who were very skilled in the use of the stones and were often called to heal the sick using the sacred stones. And as a rule, people were invited to come and witness the healings to be performed. But if you did not believe in the power of the stone, then it was best not to throw caution to the wind, because harm could come to the disbeliever. In a very old book whose author's name has been forgotten, the ceremony is described. The sick person filled a pipe, which he gave to the medicine man, and after smoking it, the man was tightly bound with thongs, even his fingers and toes interlaced with sinews, like those which bowstrings are made of, after which he was firmly tied in hide. And the tent was dark, and the medicine man sang songs addressed to the sacred stones. He sang also to his own dream songs. Strange sounds were heard in the darkness, and objects felt to be flying through the air. Voices of animals were speaking. One said, "My grandchild, you are very sick, but I will cure you." Frequently, a buffalo came, and those who did not believe in the sacred stones were kicked by the buffalo or struck by a flying stone or a bundle of clothing. And at last the medicine man called, "Hasten, make a light." Dry grass, which was ready, was placed on a fire, and in its light the man was seen wedged between the poles near the top of the teepee, with all the restraining cords cast from him. This is also a ceremony similar to the Chesapeake Men, which my friend Jerry Wagner wrote a very fascinating account of, and I've shared, and I probably will redo that video in the very near future too. So I'm going to stop there. The chapter continues on, but that's basically what's said about the image stone. Stones are strong, stones are powerful. And both I and my friend Gil are seeing the spirituality in the stones as we find artifacts on the Michigan fields and rivers, and as we find stones that are etched or stones that just occur naturally with spiritual totems or entities on them. The stones are powerful, very powerful. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed taking a look back at me at this most incredible event. Certainly one of the most significant paranormal events that I've ever experienced. I would like to hear your thoughts. So please leave your comments, your thoughts on the stone, what you think could have occurred, because I will consider any possibility. Thank you so much for joining me, and I love each and every one of you on the other side of that monitor, and God willing, I will see you all again real soon.